All right, we are back. I'm Charlie Burris. That is Zach Reagan, as always, but we are joined this time around by old media friend, former, I guess, Swain Event co-host with myself, uh, and current 247 sports writer for GoVols247, Ben McKee. What's up, Ben?
What's up, Charlie? Zach? Hope y'all are well. Appreciate you having me on.
Yeah. Let's get right into the biggest news of the last couple of days. Josh Heupel gets this $9 million raise. I haven't seen any dissenting opinions on it, I don't think. But what were your thoughts, Ben, when you saw the news of Tennessee locking down its coach?
I thought it was well deserved. I think anybody would be silly to to not be a fan of the move by Tennessee. I mean, obviously there is risk involved, but there's always risk involved when you give somebody this much money and this early into a career. I mean, for all that he's done, it is only 2 seasons, and that is a small sample size. So theoretically, it could fizzle out. I would be very surprised if that happened, but we see coaches all the time at the college level, at the professional level, and in all sports. They get a big contract, and a year or two later, it looks silly. I mean, look at Texas A&M and Jimbo Fisher right now. So that's a possibility for sure. But again, I would be very surprised if that happened. I thought it was well deserved for Josh Heupel. You're kind of accomplishing two things. If you're Tennessee, you're rewarding him for all the success that he has had up until this point, and then you're also buying into him in terms of the future and moving forward. Now, paying him $9 million isn't going to win you any football games, but it does show recruits and if Josh Heupel's going to go out and hire a coach or whatever, it shows that Tennessee is committed to Josh Heupel. And again, it's not going to bring in any players. It's not going to get any coaches to come, but it can be like a cherry on top just to show that the university supports Josh Heupel to the fullest extent. And he's now the fifth highest paid coach. I guess technically tied as the fifth highest paid coach, tied with Lane Kiffin, funny enough, at $9 million a year. And he's worth every penny in my opinion, just because again, he's not gonna slip up in my opinion, because of his ability to create a culture. And now he's going to prove that he can maintain a culture. You saw that just from going from year one to year two with a lot of veterans moving on for the program after year one. And then obviously he's a great X's and O's mind, and he can develop quarterbacks and so on and so forth. So I know it's early, and obviously there's a little bit of risk involved because it's only 2 years in, but I think he's worth every penny.
I saw, just before we started this, Danny White also received a raise and extension this morning as well. I saw you tweeting about it a little bit. I think there was some confusion. Can you explain what that rolling contract means? Because I was honestly a bit confused by it too. I think it's a 6-year rolling contract and then raise that they gave him. Does that mean it adds time onto his current contract, or how does that work?
Yep, it pretty much means that he has a 6-year contract at all times. So when 1 year ends, then that length of his contract just goes back to 6 years, and instead of counting down from 6 to 5 to 4 to 3 or whatever, like you would assume a contract does. It just he always has a 6-year contract, and it was at 5, so he technically got a year added on to his contract, but it went from a 5-year rolling contract to a 6-year rolling contract. So he's always sitting on a 6-year contract. I think the bigger news was the fact that he got bumped. I believe it was 1.8 million to 2.2 million, and that makes him one of the highest paid athletic directors in the SEC. And like I said, for Josh Heupel, that is well deserving as well. I think Danny White is worth every penny of that 2.2 million. And honestly, I saw the 2.2 million, and I thought that's it. I think Danny White is so much more valuable than the 2.2 million. And I'm a younger person, so I haven't been around Tennessee athletics as much as others. But Tennessee athletics is as healthy as it's been in my lifetime, and I don't feel like I'm a prisoner of the moment. I truly believe that because I mean, right now your baseball, football, and men's basketball team, that they are all legitimate national title contenders. They're all ranked inside the top 10. Basketball and baseball is currently ranked inside the top 5, and even the women's side of things is healthy. The Lady Vol is not exactly where you would want them to be, but they're still winning basketball games and doing so while dealing with a lot of injuries this season. And you know what Karen Weekly's going to do. The soccer program has been good. I want to say the volleyball team had a good amount of success this past season as well, and all the peripheral sports are doing well. It's not just the main sports, and football finally being back. The athletic department is as healthy for so many reasons as it has been in a long time. It's not just the winning. Obviously, winning makes everything look better and feel better, and that's the ultimate goal. But it just seems like everybody's happy in terms of facilities, and even if the current facilities like baseball are not where it needs to be at the moment, there are plans in place to get the baseball facilities to where it needs to be. Football is continuing to be built onto, basketball the same way. And then even the coaches seem to be genuinely happy, and they should be. Tony Vitello, Rick Barnes, Josh Heupel, they're all some of the highest paid coaches in the country and in the conference in their respective sports. So just every way you slice it, Tennessee athletics is as healthy as can be right now. And a lot of that is because of Danny White and his ability to come in, form a nice team, and really get things rolling. And then also something that should be mentioned as well, everybody wanted to question Danny White in Tennessee in terms of the NIL stuff at the beginning of his tenure and the new NIL era last summer. And Tennessee's been out front ahead of everybody else from the beginning. Not saying that they have the deepest pockets in the country, but they've been arguably the smartest in the country in terms of getting out in front of this new era of college athletics, and they're primed to have success in the NIL world. So again, any way you slice it, Josh Heupel, Danny White, worth every single penny, and probably, especially with Danny White, deserves more money if we're being honest.
To go to one of your areas of expertise, I mean, we used to do a basketball podcast together. I kind of forgot that happened. The Orange in the Paint, I believe is what it was called.
That's right.
On the Swain Event Network. But you're obviously, well, I guess really you're a baseball guy. We'll have to get you back on here to talk baseball when the season comes around. But as far as basketball goes, you've been covering the team, having a good season. 16-3, with that just off the wall loss to Kentucky being probably the most unfortunate moment of the season. Well, really that Colorado loss maybe. But 2 good wins this past week. You got Georgia and then Texas this week. I don't want to skip over that Georgia game, but I guess speak to how you're feeling this far into the season from what you've seen covering the team.
I think they have a chance to win the national championship. They have a chance. I hope people hear that part of it. That doesn't mean that they're going to go win a national championship. It's hard to win in March, as we know. And I think people do forget just how hard it is to win in March. There's only 16 of 300 and something that advanced to the Sweet 16. There's only 8 of the 300 and something that advanced to the Elite 8 and so on and so forth. But I'd say this basketball team program needs more success in March. And this team has the ability and tools to go do that. And if they can get it all together at the right time, then there's no reason they shouldn't make a deep run in this NCAA tournament. And I feel like the offense is going to catch up to the defense, not to being the best offense in the country, because in terms of the analytics and the numbers and the metrics, all that fun stuff, this Tennessee defense is just absolutely through the roof in terms of how good it has been. I mean, they're one of the best defenses of all time when just looking at the numbers on paper. So I'm not saying that the offense will catch up to the defense in terms of it being the best in the country, but I think it has the potential to be a top 20-ish offense. And if you have a top 20-ish offense paired with this defense that really nobody's been able to score on all season long, then that has the makings to absolutely be a Final Four basketball team. So that's the potential. I mean, they can absolutely go win a national championship, but this program still has a lot to prove in March. But I like where they're at, Charlie. I mean, the fact that they're 16-3 and 6-1 in SEC play, and Joe Lunardi had them as a 1 seed yesterday, and all of that while there's only been 6 games this season in which all the scholarship rotation players have been available. Only 6 of 19 games they've had everybody available. So to be as good as they've been this season, despite having guys in and out of the lineup for quirky reasons, Josiah's knee not responding well the first 2 months. Santi's had a little bit of a left shoulder issue at times. And then the last 2 weeks, there's been an illness going through the locker room with the assistant coaches and some players having to miss games and still feeling under the weather at LSU over the weekend. For them to be 16-3 and a potential 1 seed really speaks volumes to the coaching job that I think they're doing and also to how deep this team is. So I feel really good about this Tennessee basketball team. And we'll see the second half of the SEC schedule. The first half, much lighter than the second half. All the tough games seem to be on the back end of the schedule. So they still have things to prove. They certainly do. But, again, when you factor in that they haven't really had their whole team together at any point this season, and even when they've gotten the guys all back together at one point, they've had something else pop up. And part of that is sports, right? You're not going to go through an entire season and everybody's just going to be healthy from game 1 to the final game. But it's just been one thing after another kind of popping up out of nowhere. And if they can hit a sweet spot of having everybody together and finding their rhythm, I think this team is really going to take off. And that sounds weird to say when they're the number 4 team in the country.
So, your coworker Wes Rucker started a debate on Twitter this week, which I think is a
Really?
great debate. It kind of makes me think of like an old barbershop type debate, LeBron versus Jordan, that type of stuff. But he started this debate about, this year's team versus like Grant and Admiral's team and who would win. And we've seen Grant and Admiral both get involved in that conversation. I love that kind of stuff. How do you feel about that? Who wins? Is this year's team or Grant and Admiral's team win?
Well, first, I'm stunned that Wes is creating drama on Twitter and sparking debates. Second, I'm taking Grant and Admiral. I think those 2 players would be the best players on the floor. If this year's team matched up with that year's team, I think Grant Williams would be the best player on the floor for sure. I don't really think that's debatable just off the top of my head. And then I guess maybe making Admiral the second best overall player on those 2 teams. I guess that'd be a little more interesting of a conversation. I think Santiago Vescovi would rightfully have something to say about that, and Josiah as well, and Zakai. I would take that team, A, because they would have the best player and possibly the 2 best players. And B, I trust that offense more than I trust this offense. And I do recognize that this defense was better than that defense, but that defense also wasn't bad or anything. It just wasn't number 1 in the country according to the statistics. It was still a really good defense more often than not. And I do think this year's team is deeper, that they have more options. But just in terms of that core that Grant and Admiral team had with Kyle Alexander and Jordan Bone and Lamonte Turner and Jordan Bowden and then John Fulkerson kind of getting into the mix, Eve Pons getting into the mix a little bit. I trust that core more so than I trust this core, because I think this core still has something to prove. That they did win the SEC tournament last year. No mistaking that. And I do want to emphasize that I really like this year's basketball team. I really do. I think you have to split hairs when having this conversation, really split hairs when having this conversation. But that team went and won an SEC regular season title. They did make it to the Sweet 16. And that Sweet 16 game against Purdue, they had some calls go against them. And they also didn't really play well in the first half to dig them a hole. I mean, air ball and free throws that they had made all year and not making shots and just a really poor performance there that put them behind the 8 ball and couldn't come back and win it. But just because of I think they had the better players, top 2 players with Grant and Admiral, and they have proven in terms of if you compare side by side up until this point in their careers, I think that team had proven a little bit more. And also, I kind of feel like the competition was a little bit stronger for that team than it was this team. I think the Kentucky teams back then were better. Auburn was slightly better than it was now. Alabama wasn't what it is this year, but it was still kind of starting to come on, and it wasn't an easy team to play with Colin Sexton and John Petty and guys like that. So the top half of the league back then was a little bit stronger. LSU was a team I was trying to think of in my head with those first Will Wade teams. I feel like the top half of the league was better, whereas Tennessee hasn't really played the top half of the league just yet. They played Kentucky, and that game did not go all that well. So I also feel like this team is maybe lacking that signature win that the Lamonte and that crew, they had plenty of signature wins, and I still feel like this team is kind of searching for that signature win.
Yeah, it feels like to me what could take it over the top from that Grant and Admiral team would be Julian Phillips finally coming around consistently. I mean, we've seen what the dude can do. You just got to do it night in and night out. But then also figuring it out on the block with Olivier Coman, get more rebounds, and then Zakai continuing to be that guy. If you could just combine those three. I mean, Phillips is your leading rebounder when he's playing well. And yeah, I mean, just that development, that if it could get to the top end of all of their abilities, this team probably eclipses Grant and Admiral to me because of the depth. But I mean, of course, that's at this point it's kind of a fantasy land because that hasn't happened in a lot of nights so far this season. But to that point, I'm trying to think we should move on from basketball. I guess a big part of this basketball this weekend, is that it's also going to be not just a huge game against Texas, and you can surely go ahead and give us your thoughts on that, but it's also big, another junior day for football. I know that's not your primary point of concern for GoVols247, but if you have thoughts on that, go ahead. Just the significance of this weekend in general for basketball and football.
Yeah, it's a big week if you include Thursday with the Lady Vols hosting UConn, and College Game Day going to be here twice this week before the UConn game. And you would think that UConn wins. I mentioned it earlier. Kelly Harper dealing with some unfortunate circumstances with injuries this season. Just hasn't really been able to get lucky and keep everybody healthy throughout her tenure just yet. But that'll still be a fun environment, a fun game, and they still do have some talent that could potentially pull off the upset. So be fun to keep an eye on that. But then the big stuff over the weekend, Tennessee, Texas at night, College Game Day earlier in the day, that'll be really fun. I haven't really dove into Texas, quite frankly. They're outside of the SEC, and like a coach with the work, I kind of keep it game to game. So Texas is a very talented team. There's no doubt about that, despite dealing with all the drama with Chris Beard that it had about a month ago. And they're still playing well. They're still winning basketball games. They're ranked inside the top 10. So that'll be a fun matchup. And you would think that Tennessee, can pull off that win because they're at home. Tennessee's been really, really good at home outside of the Kentucky loss 2 weeks ago. But Texas coming to Tennessee this year, I would think that Tennessee can defend its home court, especially as the number 4 team in the country, and get a little payback for that ugly 1-point loss that it had last season in Austin. And Rick Barnes won't admit it, but I'm sure he really wants to get a win over his former school. So that'll be a fun day. And then that same day, Tennessee will be hosting a junior day. As you mentioned, their 2nd of January. It's still a little bit early in the week, so the list is still kind of being pieced together in terms of who all will be here, but there's going to be a ton of talent. You saw the first junior day, a lot of receivers, and not just ho-hum receivers, a lot of big-time receivers, 5 stars and high-level 4 stars. And I think what's pretty telling about Tennessee's success on the football field this past season is that typically when you see 5 stars coming in to visit Tennessee, they're from Georgia or the Carolinas, they're Alabama maybe, or obviously in-state. This time you're seeing guys from Hollywood, Florida, and Jacksonville area, and Orlando, 5 stars from everywhere. There's one from New Jersey, high-level 4-star. There's so many recruiting services now that it kind of gets all jumbled together. But some of the elite prospects in the country coming in from New Jersey and Florida and still Georgia and the Carolinas, as I mentioned. And there'll be much more of that this weekend. And Ryan Callahan and myself will be over there before the basketball game trying to track it all down. So it's a little early in the week for names in terms of a complete list, but there's going to be plenty of talent, and we'll have plenty of coverage of it at GoVols247.
Has Callahan given you any intel on two different things. One, Davison Igbinosun, the kid out of Ole Miss that's getting discussed about potentially transferring to Tennessee. And then also a lot of people have been talking about Deuce Robinson, who he made quick friends with Nico Iamaleava at the Polynesian Bowl. Has Callahan given you any tidbits on those?
With Deuce Robinson, it doesn't seem like that's going to happen. I think it was a slight possibility. And at the time of this recording, I have not seen or been given indication that he'll be here this weekend. That's certainly a fascinating storyline to watch because Tennessee does need a tight end. They have Jacob Warren coming back. They have the Castles kid coming in from UC Davis, but they don't really have a younger guy in the wings. They do have Ethan Davis that they just signed, and he's here on campus, but he's coming off a pretty significant shoulder injury. I believe a torn labrum that sidelined him for his senior season, and he appears to be healthy. But again, he's still a freshman. But that's really it. They do have Jonathan Eccles committed in this upcoming 2024 class, one of the best players in the class. He's down in the state of Florida. So you do have some youngsters in the wings waiting their turn, but you don't really have a ton of them. And Eccles hasn't signed on the dotted line. So really, I'm only counting that you have one young tight end. So you would think that he would see an opportunity for early playing time and potentially give Tennessee a strong look on top of really hitting it off with Nico Iamaleava last week at the Polynesian Bowl. But as I said, last I heard, I had not been given any indication that he was coming, but that can certainly always change. It's recruiting. But in terms of the Ole Miss corner, I believe Tennessee's in the thick of it. He is somebody that Tennessee was pursuing fairly hard down the stretch in last year's recruiting cycle in the 2022 class, if I'm not mistaken. But sounds like there's some other SEC teams involved, like a Texas A&M. I think Florida State's trying to get involved as well. But Tennessee's certainly in the thick of it because they need more corners. They did go get Gabe Judy from BYU, who was at Vanderbilt for 3 seasons before playing at BYU this past season. And look, Pro Football Focus, I wouldn't take their grades to the bank. I wouldn't just automatically assume he's going to be awesome because of a Pro Football Focus grade. But according to them and even the statistics, which I value more than their grades, he was really good for BYU this past season. And Lord knows Tennessee needs help at corner and not really in a position to turn down help in the secondary at the moment. So I don't know that I'd bank on him being a bona fide stud as a starter, but he certainly provides depth. But if they can go out and get the kid from Ole Miss as well, you're just adding more depth and a very quality player. So Tennessee's trying there, and it'd be a big get if they can land him.
Shifting gears here just for a second, since you're a baseball guy, Manny Ramirez's son committed to Tennessee last week. 2 things. One, does he make it to campus? I tried to look up and see. He's a 2024 guy, so I couldn't find a lot of like draft projections or anything like that for him. Does he make it to campus? And 2, how big was last spring for Tennessee? All the media attention they got nationally. Obviously, everybody saw how exciting they were every weekend playing. How much do you think that played into his decision to commit to Tennessee? Because regardless of his skill, that's a pretty big name to commit to Tennessee baseball.
Yeah, it is, and we'll see if he makes it to campus. The MLB draft is so weird. We could sit here and have a 2-hour long conversation.
Oh, I'm down for that. I'll talk baseball all day.
Charlie knows how to get a hold of me. We'll set it up if that's what you want to do.
Yep.
But like Tennessee has 3 freshman outfielders at the moment: Dylan Dreiling, Reese Chapman, and Alex Stanwich. 3 freshman outfielders who should not be on campus right now, but kind of got overlooked during the draft process. Tennessee is kind of was stunned at the time that they were able to. Stunned may be too strong of a word, but they were relieved, I guess you could say, that they made it to campus. And looking back in hindsight, after the way they performed in the fall, they feel even better about them. They're like, how in the world did these guys make it to campus? So my point in bringing them up is that you always have these players that are highly ranked. Like everybody knew who Reese Chapman was in high school, and when he committed, probably did not think he was going to make it to campus. But then a year or two later, he's on campus and performing well in the fall as a freshman. So my point is that you just never really know. There are some guys that you absolutely know is not going to make it to campus. Brady House is a good example of that. Not this past draft, but the previous draft. He's a shortstop third baseman from Georgia, went in the top 10 to the Nationals. He was the number 1 overall player in the country. There's never a chance of him making it to campus. Never. So it's not that type of situation, but he is one of the premier talents for his class in the country, one of the best prospects in the country. And I'm sure Tennessee will be nervous until he actually makes it to campus. And I don't know that it was so much this past season because the 2 years prior really helped Tennessee as well. And actually going to Omaha, I think that was the big thing that helped Tennessee baseball in recruiting. This year absolutely helped, but all of the very talented players that Tennessee is bringing in and has been bringing in, they had an awareness of Tony Vitello and Josh Elander and Frank Anderson and some of those early players that Tennessee was able to develop and get to Omaha with and get them drafted. So they had that awareness, and I think kind of this year, this past season, just reinforced that. So I don't think that it was the number 1 team in the country and them being villains and getting all the attention that sold him on Tennessee, but it certainly helped. My point is more so that Tennessee was already trending in that direction with a bunch of recruits. Making it to Omaha was the best thing to happen for Tennessee baseball recruiting, just because obviously that's a huge deal. And they started to see the benefits of that this past cycle. And baseball recruiting is also absolutely strange. They got a commitment from an 8th grader last week. I mean, they get commitments so far out. It is not at all like basketball and football. I was surprised that Manny Ramirez's son was a 2024 prospect because usually they're getting commitments from 8th graders and freshmen and sophomores in high school. So it's a little bit weird in that regard. But there's no doubt about that Tennessee is recruiting at an elite level. And honestly, I think this past season helped them more with transfers because those are guys, when they were coming out of high school, Tennessee baseball wasn't necessarily what it is now. But now they have an awareness because of the past 2 seasons and all the attention that it got last year. And as somebody in the baseball program told me after the season, everybody was thrilled that they lost and did not make it to Omaha, yet still all the top transfers in the country were calling, wanting to come play for Tony Vitello.
We're definitely going to get you back on when baseball season starts here in the next couple months. I guess, what is it, February?
And next month.
17th, yeah.
Yep, 17th, 3 weeks from Friday, I think.
Yep. Well, Ben, tell us everything. Plug whatever you got. Tell the good folks where to find you now over at 247.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Ben McKee 14 on Twitter is how you can follow my work. And then also, as I said earlier, GoVols247 is where you can find complete coverage of everything Tennessee athletics. And it's a busy week. Danny White, Josh Heupel, they're getting pay raises, nice pay raises. And then obviously a big week for basketball, both for the men and women. We got a big junior day for Tennessee football recruiting on Saturday, and we'll have coverage of it all up at GoVols247.com.
Go check it out. And for this week, that's it for me and Zach here on the podcast. Thanks to everybody for watching. Thanks to Ben for coming on, and we'll talk to y'all next week.